UFC Fight Night, Barboza versus Murphy from the UFC Apex this Saturday night. It is another Apex card, which isn't ideal, but we've got 12 fights in this card, and it's an interesting card because there's a lot of fights, and we're going to go over this, where it feels like there's an obvious winner. I don't know. Like, the biggest example of that is Adrian Yanez, Salvador. We're going to talk about that fight later, but there's some fights in this card that feel like they're just set up for guys to win. Abus Magomedov, Alves. And again, it's an Apex card, so not much attention is going to be on this card, so they can make fights like this. But I really, it's interesting because the UFC doesn't always matchmake like this. But again, we'll talk about it as we get going with this video. But folks, if you haven't yet, though, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for some more UFC here on the channel. Tomorrow, we will have our Bellator Champion Series Paris, France predictions here on the channel. Your main event is Patchy Mix versus Magomedov. In the co-main event, no, it is not Derek Anderson fighting Cedric Doumbé. It is Jaleel Willis, but that's your co-main event. Cedric Doumbé returns to France. So Le Mayor is back, but let's get into these UFC predictions here on the channel. We're starting things off here with Umar C taking on Antonio Trocoli. Now, real quick, I'm recording this on May 10th, which is Friday, the day before UFC St. Louis. I'm just getting ahead with videos. I'm gonna be away for the weekend, so if anything does change on this card, I will provide updates in the description down below if a fight is off. The only difference is if there's a main event switch, then there's probably going to be a completely different video. But if any of the undercard fights fall through, or there's something changes, or anything gets added to the Apex card, then I will put the links, or I will put a prediction in the description down below. So we start things off here with Umar C taking on one Antonio Trocoli in this fight. Now, you might know Antonio Trocoli because he's been booked before in the UFC. Back at UFC 282, back in Vegas, Blachowicz Ankalaev main event, and he was booked against Ovince St. Preux. Now, fight never happened. The fight got canceled. We have not heard from the guy since. That's December of 2022. Now he's being booked yet again at taking on a very good up-and-coming fighter who's coming out of Bulgarian top team in Omar C from France. But talking about Trocoli again, we've talked about him some when he was booked against OSP. I didn't understand entirely why he got a shot in the Contender Series in the first place. Because going into the Contender, he had lost 3 out of his last 5. Yes, he was on a 2-fight winning streak, but he lost 3 in a row. Then he got the shot in the Contender. I didn't quite get it. He didn't get the contract in the Contender Series. Originally, he did win the fight with a neck crank in the first round, but then he popped for a failed drug test. This Nandrolone. I'm not Walter White. I don't know what that is. But then he won again in 2021, winning on Brazilian Fight Series by beating a guy at the time who was 7-1 by rear naked choke in the first round. Then he got the fight against OSP. It gets canceled because he withdraws. And then now here he is booked a year and a half later in the UFC Apex against Omar C. C's the guy who fought in KSW. He had a couple fights over there. He won his last fight in the summer of 2023. It's been about 11 months since he's last fought over in Paris, France on the King of the Fighters card. That's what it's called, KOF. One where he ended up winning that fight by TKO in the first round. C is undefeated. He will use his all-around game to win fights as he's able to successfully get fights down to the mat, and he's able to, again, outstrike his opponents as well. C is huge for the division, too. His last fight, though, he did fight at heavyweight at 265. This one's at light heavyweight. He's 6'5". He's a huge guy. Trocoli is huge as well, though. They're both 6'5". So both big light heavyweights in this fight. Something that I think we are seeing more and more out of. So we are seeing more and more bigger, like in taller light heavyweights as a whole. I'm gonna have an 84-inch reach for C, and he's gonna have a 2-inch reach advantage against Trocoli, who's going to have an 82-inch reach. I like C to win the fight. I think C goes out there and wins this one. Again, just with Trocoli, before even the UFC run, we talked about 2 out of 5 of his fights. 3 out of the 5 fights before his Contender Series fight were losses, right? Against an 18-6 Jacob Volkman, a 10-4 Diego Lima, who, again, Diego Lima ended up being in the UFC. And again, these fights are from a while ago too, but it's been inactivity. He's fought once since COVID happened. That kind of just shows you what I think you need to know for this fight. Again, it's a mixed bag for Trocoli here. I don't think he's all that great to begin with. And on top of that, again, we have not seen the guy recently, and he's taken on an undefeated fighter who I think he's going to have a lot of trouble with. Originally, it's supposed to be Adolfo Bellato taken on C. C now gets the opponent switched to Trocoli. On Tapology, it's 98% C picks we're taking C to win the fight by first round knockout. I think he goes right through him. I don't think it's too much of a competition. Again, I hate the inactivity out of Trocoli, and I think that's why C gets the W. Moving on to our next one, we have got Tamires Vidal taking on Melissa Gatto. On Tapology, I'm confused why the picks are where they are. Now, the odds kind of... I think the odds on the screen are a little inflated for Melissa Gatto. I don't think she should be that big of a favorite. Now, on Tapology, Tamires Vidal is the favorite. More people are picking Vidal to win the fight than Gatto. Now, originally this was supposed to be Vidal versus Hailey Cowan. Cowan's pulled out of another fight, and now Gatto comes in here on short notice. I get it. She's up a weight class, up at 135 pounds. But I just think she's better than Tamires Vidal. Vidal is coming off of a loss to Montserrat Randon, where she lost it by split decision. She was a pretty sizable favorite in that fight. It's on the Fazeev Gamrot undercard, and she loses it by split decision. It's a close fight. Randon, I think, pulls away in that fight by winning with her wrestling. That's kind of how she gets it done in that one. Vidal, before that flying knee to Ramona Pascal. But Ramona Pascal is not very good, right? So you now get Vidal versus Gatto, and I understand Gatto's taking this one on short notice, and I get it, she's lost 2 in a row, but there's her two. Ariane Lipsky, who's a top 15 fighter, 125 pounds, and Tracy Cortez, who everyone seems to have trouble beating in the UFC. And it was, you know, I didn't think she was going to go out there and beat Cortez personally. I thought that Gatto had a very good chance of winning that fight. Of course, Cortez gets it done. But before that, for Gatto, right, 2 straight wins. It's a win over Victoria Leonardo. It's a doctor stoppage. She breaks her arm. And then a Sijara Eubanks TKO victory in the 3rd round. I just think Gatto excels in a lot more areas than what Vidal does as a whole. I think Gatto is just better. I think her striking is better. We'll see if we see any wrestling here, because in terms of jiu-jitsu, I like Gatto to beat Vidal. Vidal, to me, is just really, I don't know if just straight up mid is the way to describe her, but that's kind of how I feel with her fighting style. She's just not, she doesn't really excel in anything. Yeah, she was able to beat a can in Ramona Pasquale. Okay. Before the UFC run, she was winning decent fights, beating decent names, but I don't know. Like, I think her jiu-jitsu is decent, but I don't think it's to the point where she can submit Melissa Gatto. I think Gatto is good enough defensively with her jiu-jitsu to stay out of spots where she's going to get submitted by Vidal. And then on the feet, I really like Gatto to win the fight. So when you look at the odds, right, you got minus 410 from Melissa Gatto, plus 300 for Vidal. Of course, this just open because Cowan just pulled out of the fight, and it's supposed to be Cowan versus Vidal. Again, I would not put anything on Gatto in this fight, but I think it's ridiculous that on Topology, after 400 people voted on this fight, 57% are going with Vidal, 43% going with Gatto. I understand Gatto's lost 2 in a row, but I just think she's all around better than Vidal, and I don't think going up a weight class is going to affect her too much. She's not going to have to cut going into this fight. I get it. She's not a natural 135-pounder, but still, again, sizable. She's going to match up basically the exact same way Vidal is. They're both 5'5", 5'6". They have the same reach, basically. I think Gatto's going to match up pretty well with her here. I think the fight stays standing, and in a stand-up fight, I like Gatto a lot to win this fight. Again, we saw her finish Sijara Eubanks with a body kick, but I do think Gatto wins. I'm going to take her to win this one by unanimous decision. Let's move on to our next one here in the bantamweight division. We have got Alatengheili taking on Edson Rodrigues. So for the Mongolian Knight, Alatengheili, 16 wins, 9 losses, and 2 draws, coming off a unanimous decision loss to Chris Gutierrez. And Gutierrez, of course, after that, parlayed that into a main event spot in the Apex against Song Yadong the next month. Obviously, he lost that fight by decision, but it was a good win for Gutierrez over Alatengheili by unanimous decision, but now Alatengheili looks to regroup against one Edson Rodrigues. Now Alatengheili 4-2-1 so far in the UFC. For Rodrigues, he's got an 8-3 professional record and 1-2 so far in the UFC, coming off of that loss to Farid Basharat by arm triangle choke in the 1st round, his last fight. Before that, it was a big win over Shannon Ross by 59-second knockout. Huge favorite. He weighed in overweight, but still, good win for Rodrigues. Shannon Ross, though not the greatest UFC name. Rodrigues' first fight in the UFC was a split decision loss to CJ Vergara. So now you get Rodrigues and Alatengheili. It's an interesting fight, really, because I can see both guys winning on paper, because Alatengheili's been beat before, but when you look back at this guy's losses, not bad names, right? Casey Kenny, Chris Gutierrez, Vidrada Gustavo Lopez. I understand Gustavo Lopez is not a UFC name at all. I mean, this is a guy who's gone to Octagon since and has not performed well over there in that promotion either. But the wins are just really not UFC wins, with the exception of Dana Bakary. I understand Bakary has been awful recently, but you look at the wins, right? Ryan Benoit is a split decision win. Ryan Bonoy is really not UFC caliber. I guess Denabakadi got cut. Apparently, he's in Karate Combat now. Alatengheili finishes Kevin Kroom in the first round. Kevin Kroom's not a UFC caliber guy. Chad Henniger won his last fight, right? He beat, Charalampus Grigoriou. Still, though, not the best win, even though it is aging a little bit better than what it was at the time, right? We'll see. Alatengheili's got power. He can strike, and he will go for it. He is a fun fighter to watch, but Chris Gutierrez really just outclassed him in their fight on that Yusuf Barboza card. 110-38 significant strike count in favor of Chris Gutierrez in that fight. For Alatengheili before that, again, the win over Chad Henniger. And he looked decent in that fight, used the wrestling some. For Cledson Rodrigues, it's another guy who does possess some power for 125 pounds, or 135 pounds, excuse me. But again, not the highest level of guy as well. You saw Farid Basharat really dominating the grappling over in Paris, France. Vergara and Rodrigues was close. It was a really close back and forth fight, but again, Vergara just got the nod ever so slightly. I think it's a close fight, but I'm going to take the Chinese fighter here, or the Mongolian Knight, fighting out of Fight Ready in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm taking Alatengheili to win the fight. He's the plus 150 favorite in this fight. I like the underdog a lot here. For the value, I think it's great. And also, again, Alatengheili, 6 fights in the UFC is 4-2. Rodrigues, 1-2. Again, we're not playing the numbers entirely here because, again, I understand, right? Rodrigues has fought better guys. I think Basharat is better. Shannon Ross isn't a great fighter, but okay, Vergara is not a horrible first fight in the UFC either. Obviously, we're pointing to Basharat as the toughest guy either of these guys have fought, other than Chris Gutierrez, right? Other than Gutierrez. So actually, I don't know. On paper, it's kind of even on levels and strength of schedule. But I do like Alatengheili to win this fight. Alatengheili has looked better in some of these spots. Rodrigues did get shut down pretty quickly in his last fight. I understand it's a very different stylistic matchup that he's going to get in this one. But his only win is Shannon Ross, right? Rodrigues was going on a run before the UFC in Jungle Fight, but really he was fighting for the flyweight championship over there. He wins it, but I don't know. His run wasn't that great in Jungle Fight. He wins 2 fights, becomes the champion. I don't know. He is a flyweight. I feel like that should be a bantamweight, and I think he's a little outsized the weight class. I'm going to take the natural bantamweight here in Alatengheili, who, again, is not the biggest guy for the weight class. Is a guy who I believe has fought he fought Kaya Skura in Road FC back in 2017, 125 pounds as well. So both these guys are really flyweights coming up to bantamweight. I don't know. I think it's a close fight, but I do think Alatengheili does win. I'm going to take him by decision. I think the striking is better as a whole. I'm taking Alatengheili to come through with the victory. I think on points he's going to win, but I think it's going to be because of the damage that he does do with those strikes, right? So I'm going to take Alatengheili to win the fight by decision. Let's go on to our next one here. Pinheiro Rodrigues taking on Ariane Carnelossi in the strawweight division. You got Rodrigues as a slight favorite in this one over Carnelossi, and I get it. I understand why she is, right? You got 9-1 Pinheiro Rodrigues, who has done well so far in the UFC. She's 2-1. The one loss is to Jillian Robertson, but Jillian Robertson's going to give you a tough out everywhere, right? Jillian Robertson's just that tough of a fighter. Robertson went out there and submitted her in the second round. Before that, for Rodrigues, though, back-to-back wins over Kay Hansen and Sam Hughes. The Hansen win at UFC 273. The Sam Hughes win on a fight night later that year in 2022. And Rodrigues, I understand Robertson submitted her, but again, Rodrigues, though, is more than willing to engage in that wrestling style of fight. She's more than willing to engage in a grappling fight as well. And that's what she was able to do against Sam Hughes, against Kay Hansen, more of the same, right? Hansen was kind of known a little bit as a grappler coming into the UFC, and Rodrigues really shut her down with her wrestling. And you got to think that she's going to try to do the same exact thing here to Ariane Carnelossi, who's coming off a loss to Lupi Godinez, and Godinez did exactly what Pinheiro Rodrigues is going to try to do. I don't think Pinheiro Rodrigues is on the level of Godinez. Don't get me wrong. Godinez just lost to Vina Janjihoba, which, again, there goes kind of the hype on Lupi Godinez as a whole. But still, Rodrigues should follow the same game plan as Godinez. Constant wrestling attack. And Carnelossi has not fought in 2 years. Her last fight was on UFC 274, Geiji Oliveira, again, in May of 2022. It's been that long since she has fought. But that's the game plan Pinheiro Rodrigues should have in this one. And I think, again, the wrestling is going to be huge. We know Liang Na is a very, 5 to 7.5 minute fighter, and that's kind of what she did against Carnelossi until, again, she wore out and Carnelossi beat her that first fight at UFC 261 in Jacksonville in 2021. But again, Liang Na saw some success wrestling Carnelossi. I know Carnelossi did well in her jiu-jitsu game and her wrestling game against one Estela Nunes, but Estela Nunes is not the greatest. So I think we can dismiss that and really look to Pinheiro Rodrigues really looking to grapple here and winning the fight that way. That's how I think this fight plays out. I do think it's a Pinheiro Rodrigues victory, and I think the wrestling's the biggest deciding factor in this fight. I don't think it's too much of a controversial pick. Again, we have not seen Carnelossi in about 2 years, over 2 years. And Rodrigues knows what she wants to do. That's, you know, that's how she goes into fights. She's more than willing to engage in that wrestling game. On the feet, I think this fight's competitive, but I just don't think it stays up there for very long because I think, again, Rodrigues is just, she is going to remain persistent on the fact that this fight needs to be on the ground. And again, if it is, I do see the advantage for her down there. I think on the feet, I think Carnelossi is slightly better. Again, Carnelossi has gone in there and gotten finishes on the feet before in her past. Same with Rodrigues too, but Rodrigues has been more of a wrestler so far in the UFC. So I think we follow what we've seen so far in the UFC, and it's that Rodrigues is, you know, a fighter who can go out there and get fights down to the mat and hold her opponents down there. And I think that's going to be more of the same in this fight against Ariane Carnelossi. I'm taking Pinheiro Rodrigues to win the fight by decision. It's not a fight that's going to, you know, it's not a fight that's going to pop off the card or really just stand out, but it's just a win, I think, for Pinheiro Rodrigues to get one back. I think she improves to a record of 10-1 with a unanimous decision victory over Ariane Carnelossi. To our next one, oh, it's Abus Magomedov. Now, okay. I made a video about Abus Magomedov. For a short run last summer, I made short films about UFC fighters. Now, for some reason, the last one I made, nobody watched. It was fine. It was Tom Aspinall. I thought it was a good video, but it's fine. Nobody watched them, so I stopped making them. Anyways, they take a while to make. Anyways, I made one about Abus Magomedov. It's the first one I made. So I know a lot about Abus Magomedov, like more than I do of the typical fighter in the UFC. And it's a shame what's happened to him, but okay. He's lost back-to-back fights. Now, at the time he lost to Sean Strickland, I thought he was going to lose the fight. I made the video about him anyway, but I picked Sean Strickland to win that week. It was really weird, though. It was out of nowhere. He gets a shot in a main event. I remember at the time, I put this in my video too, that Caio Borralho called him out. It's like, why are we hyping this guy up? This guy has beat Dustin Stoltzfus, who's 0-4, 0-3 in the UFC, and we're going to give him the main event spot against a ranked guy in Sean Strickland. Again, it reminds me of what the UFC did with Joe Pyfer. They had Joe Pyfer go out and fight Jack Hermansson in a UFC main event in the Apex, right? Like, they've done this before. And Abus went out there and he fought Sean Strickland and he emptied his load. Pause in the first round though, right? Like, you get what I mean. He went for it in the first round against Sean Strickland and he couldn't finish him, right? He couldn't get, God, this is sounding a little bit weird. He couldn't get the finish though, right? He couldn't finish Strickland in that first round, and Strickland again wore him down in the second and eventually finished him because Abus again went for it in the first round and could not get the finish. Now, he fights Caio Borralho after that. Tough fight. I think Borralho drops him. Again, we thought that fight going into it, we were like, all right, if Abus can keep the fight standing, he has somewhat of a chance, but Borralho should probably beat him by grounding him. Well, no, it didn't happen. Borralho just went out there and outstruck him. And shout out to Borralho. Borralho is very good, right? There's no doubting how good Caio Borralho is. After his last win over Paul Craig, I get it, Craig can't strike, but still, Borralho is going to be a staple of the top 10 for a very long time. And Borralho went out there and just outpointed Abus and beat him by decision over in Brazil. So now Abus is back, and he's getting Warlley Alves. This is a fight set up for Abus to win. If Abus can't win this fight, he shouldn't be in the UFC. I don't think it's going to come to that, though, because I do think Abus is, like, top 25-ish. I don't think he's, like, I don't think he deserves to even be on the prelims of this card, which I think is a little bit ridiculous that he's on the prelims of a UFC Apex card. But I do think Abus is better than Warlley Alves. He's better than a 33-year-old Warlley Alves. Actually, Abus is older than him, but still. He's older than a guy in Warlley Alves who has been in the octagon for many fights, even though he's only got 21 professional fights, but he's been in the UFC, he's had 15 UFC fights. I think he's better than Warlley Alves, who's been knocked out multiple times, who has been very slow in his last couple fights, and has looked like, again, a shell of his former self. Jeremiah Wells knocked him out after Warlley Alves had a career resurgence in that win over Munir Lazzez, but he loses to Jeremiah Wells. Then he loses to Nicholas Dalby in a close fight, and they feed him to the Wolves. They give him Ikram Aliskerov, and Aliskerov knocks him out in the first round with a flying knee. Abus will make this look easy. This is going to look somewhat like the Abus-Dustin Stoltzfus fight. He's going to go right after him, and he's going to knock him out. Alves has to get the takedown in this fight, something that he hasn't been all that great in doing so recently, because you know his jiu-jitsu is good. Obviously, he's got the submission win over Colby Covington like 9 years ago. But on the feet, this isn't going to go well for Warlley. He might be able to be competitive, but his chin's just not going to hold up. It's just not. It's not going to hold up against Abus Magomedov. Magomedov hits too hard. He hits too hard. He's a pretty good striker. If you don't know the story about Abus Magomedov, well, I mean, he had that fight where he was one fight away from winning $1 million. He lost to Lewis Taylor. It is what it is. But this is a guy who was born in Dagestan. He grew up wrestling his entire life. His parents moved him to Germany. Germany's not the biggest wrestling country. So yeah, went out there in Germany, He took a lot of kickboxing classes. That's how he's kind of the mix of the kickboxer wrestler that he is. He's not going to need the wrestling here. He's going to go out here and out kickbox Warley Alves, and he's going to knock his head off in the first round. So give me a boost of Magomedov to get back on the winning ways. He's going to win this fight by first round knockout. 94% of people are picking him on Tapology. The odds, -250 on a boost Magomedov. That is going to skyrocket throughout the week. I think he will close at least -500. I would expect there is some value. I think some value in -250 if you look to parlay it right now. But I do like a boost Magomedov to go out here and win this fight by first round KO. Okay, on to our next one here. Another huge favorite. We've got Tom Nolan taking on Victor Martinez. I understand why Nolan's a favorite. I don't know why he's this big of a favorite, though. I think it should be a little bit closer in odds. But I do kind of get it because Martinez looked horrible in his first UFC fight, right? Jordan Levitt went out there and beat him down, got him in the clinch, and just gave him knees, and Martinez really couldn't get going at all. Martinez got finished in the first round, and now he gets Tom Nolan, who lost his first UFC fight, and Martinez finds himself as a +360 underdog in his second UFC bout. Now, Tom Nolan lost his first UFC fight. Nicholas Mota knocked him out in the first round, a fight that Nolan was a -350 favorite in. He is turning this around 4 months later to take on Victor Martinez. I don't love it. I don't think you should be back in the octagon 4 months after being knocked out. I think if you get knocked out at least 6 months, that should be the minimum until you come back, right? He gets dropped by Mota. He was a -350 favorite again in that fight. And he got dropped by Mota and finished in the first round. Now, this fight is, though, set up for him to win. Martinez, I don't think, is very good. Victor Martinez is a guy who doesn't hit with that much power, right? He was beating guys in Fury FC and in Combate who weren't very good. He was the Fury FC lightweight champion. That's great. Good for him. But I don't think he's all that good. He doesn't hit for that much power. You saw his fight against Jacob Rosales in the Contender Series. You know, he hit Rosales with some good shots, and maybe that's just Rosales. His chin was pretty good, but like Rosales just kept walking through him, right? It was a good fight, don't get me wrong. Martinez wins, gets the contract. He gets dropped by Rosales in that fight, but he outstrikes Rosales 144 to 113. You go back, you watch that fight. Rosales, again, wins the first round. Looks like he might have Martinez out of there early, but Martinez regroups, recovers, ends up winning the last 2 rounds and winning the fight. Very competitive and a good fight. However, an entertaining fight doesn't always mean that you should be in the UFC skill-wise. He's 13-5. It's not the greatest record. And I think Tom Nolan's going to give him problems. I think so. Again, I know that Nolan just got knocked out, and that's kind of why I'm a little bit hesitant to pick the guy, but he's still a pretty good prospect from Australia. He's from Queensland, 24 years old. He was 23 when he made his UFC debut, and he just didn't have his best performance against Mota. Okay, it's going to happen. I think he's able to come back here and regroup. Martinez doesn't scare me that much with the power, so I don't think Nolan's chin's going to be too affected by taking this fight so short after losing his first UFC bout. So I'm not too scared of that. Okay, he's just going to run to a big power shot by Martinez, and that's really the only shot Martinez has. I don't think it really goes that way. I do think Nolan is the better striker. I think Nolan is able to remain out the way of big power shots that Martinez may throw. That may not affect Nolan in the greatest manner either. But I do definitely think Tom Nolan wins the fight. Again, I'm going to trust the guy who saw a lot of hype outside of his UFC run, who, again, was well hyped as a prospect. Going into the UFC, won the Contender Series with a big knockout. I think we see more of that here against Victor Martinez. I think we see a quick night in the office. If Jordan Levitt's able to knock out Victor Martinez or finish Victor Martinez with strikes in the first round, yeah, Tom Nolan should be able to do the same. I'm going to take Nolan. That's what he's good at. He should be able to go out here and get the finish in the first. Let's go on to our next one here. Themba Gorimbo will take on Ramiz Brahimaj in this fight. For Brahimaj, 10-4 professionally. We have not seen the guy in over 2 years. So another guy that we have not seen in a very long time will return. And he's taking on Themba Gorimbo, who is on a little bit of a run here. I do think Themba's a little bit overrated. I'm not going to lie. I think he is. Now, his Tapology picture, if you go on his account or his profile, it's him holding the UFC championship, which I think is a little bit ridiculous. But Themba is not a young prospect by any stretch of the imagination. He's a guy who, again, has been around. He's 33. He's from Zimbabwe. He's got the story, of course, The Rock, when The Rock showed up to MMA Masters in Florida and, congratulated him because, of course, the story where he had like $4 in his bank account and he was fighting in the UFC. That kind of just shows you the pay sometimes in the UFC, but it's fine. Themba's now 2-1 after beating Takashi Sato. That's when that kind of story was made. Don't forget, lost his UFC debut to AJ Fletcher. But I've gotten all 4 of Themba Gorimbo's last 4 fights right? I got his fight on Fury FC. I watched that card where he beat Julio Rodrigues. Not the baseball player, but Julio Rodrigues, the MMA fighter. He went out there, lost AJ Fletcher, got that one right. Then picked him to beat Sato, picked him to beat Pete. What was his nickname? Blood Game? Dead Game Rodriguez. I don't think Pete Rodriguez is no longer in the UFC. But Themba Gorimbo was able to knock him out in 32 seconds. He did what he needed to do against Pierre Rodrigues. I thought he was going to submit him, if I'm being honest, because Rodrigues doesn't have a ground game. But Themba showed the power. And Gorimbo has showed that, yeah, okay, he can outstrike some of these guys. And he's got some power to pop some of... He's got power behind his shots, right? He's got some pop behind his shots, what I'm looking for. He's able to drop Takashi Sato in a fight that was not the greatest, but he dropped Sato in that fight. For Ramiz Brahimaj, this is primarily a grappler, right? Ramiz Brahimaj is 10-4. He's 2-2 in the UFC. It's just been up and down. His first fight, he has the fight against Max Payne Griffin in the Apex in 2020, where his ear is literally falling off. Like, I'm serious. It's pretty graphic, but go look it up. Ramiz Brahimaj's ear is coming off of his head. I believe it was because of an elbow that Griffin landed on the side of the head and just ripped his ear open, and his ear was almost like, it almost came off his head. That's why they had to stop the fight. He beat Sasha Planetlikov after that, because we learned that, okay, Planetlikov has no ground game, so Brahimaj was able to do that to him. Loses to Court McGee. I thought Court McGee was going to be the better wrestler in that fight, and he was, right? Just two wrestlers going at it, and Court McGee was the better wrestler in that fight. He ended up winning it by decision. And then the Michael Gilmore fight, again, it was just set up for Brahimaj to win. Gilmore was horrible, and Gilmore had no ground game. So what Ramiz Brahimaj did? Well, he took him down, he submitted him in 2 minutes. This is a tough out. It's a tough out. Like, Gorimbo's a tough fight for him, because Gorimbo's got decent defensive grappling, he's got decent defensive wrestling, and he hits very hard. And that's something that's going to, I think going to really hurt Brahimaj here. Brahimaj's striking game is not very good. Right? We saw Court McGee knock him down. We saw Court McGee outstrike him. We saw Max Griffin really dominate him on the feet as well. When you're getting outstruck by Court McGee, though, yeah, that's kind of a problem. It just is. I don't think this fight's going to go well for Ramiz Brahimaj. And I think Themba Gorimbo, honestly, is a little overrated. I think he is. I just think because he has some of that hype because of The Rock and everything, because it's a cool story. Don't get me wrong, it is a very cool story. But I think, hey, he does win here. I think he's going to win this fight. I think he's going to go 3-1 in the UFC. I think Themba does go out and knock Brahimaj out in the first round. Because I just don't think, again, striking-wise, Ramiz Brahimaj can compete. I don't think he can compete with Gorimbo on the feet. I think Brahimaj will look to get the fight down, but I do trust Gorimbo's wrestling enough. He's training with guys, again, Colby Covington's in his weight class. He's training with guys like Colby Covington. I believe Nico Price is still over there. He's training with these high-level wrestlers over at MMA Masters that they bring in. He's used to good wrestling attacks. As long as he's able to stay off his back against Brahimaj, because that's where Brahimaj excels when he's on top, I think Gorimbo is good here. And I don't even know if Brahimaj is going to be able to get that. Gorimbo might just go straight through him. Gorimbo's got power. He's got good striking. I do like him to win the fight. Give me Themba Gorimbo to win this fight by first round knockout. To the strawweight division, Vanessa Demopoulos versus Emily Ducote. Another fight that I don't understand why people are picking the way they are on Tapology. The odds make actual sense to me. Like, that's, I think, where if I was a bookmaker, if I was an odds maker, if I was running with the books, those are the odds that I would pick. I put Emily Ducote at around -265, and yeah, Demopoulos at about +215. That feels right. On Tapology, 67% of people are going with Vanessa Demopoulos to win the fight, and 33% are going with Emily Ducote. It does not make sense to me. I think we're looking at what both of these fighters have done in the UFC, and we're thinking, okay, Ducote hasn't seen the most success. She's 2-2. Look at her record. Fine. Demopoulos, hey, you look at her record in the UFC, she's 4-2. And Ducote's record does look a little bit ugly. She's 13-8, sure. But look at the fighters Ducote's fought. I want you to look at Ducote's entire run as a professional MMA fighter. Now, Emily Whitmire is not the greatest, okay? But her professional debut was Emily Whitmire. She lost by decision, okay? That's one of her losses. Her 6th ever professional fight is for the Bellator Flyweight Championship against Ilima Lei Macfarlane. I don't think Ilima Lei Macfarlane's the greatest, but for your 6th fight for the World Championship, that's difficult. She loses it by decision. Her next loss, Ilima Lei Macfarlane. The second Ilima Lei Macfarlane fight was for the belt. The first one was just a flyweight fight. She loses the first one to Macfarlane. She loses the second one by armbar in the 5th round for the championship. Okay, the Christina Williams loss. Okay, that's not good. That's just not good. She was a 1-0 fighter at the time. Williams is now 7-4. She's fighting in Invicta now. She's lost to Ketlin Souza a couple, I guess a year ago now. That's not a great loss. Because at the time, again, Williams was 1-0. Veda Arteaga is a Bellator name. Close fight, just like the Christina Williams fight was. Kanako Maruta. Not a bad loss at all. Maruta, I know, did not see the most success in the UFC. And if we're playing MMA math, Maruta lost to Demopoulos. Demopoulos is fighting, and Ducote lost to Maruta. But Maruta went on a run before the UFC. That was the fight that got her into the UFC. It was for the strawweight championship. She barely beats Ducote. And there are other losses. Angela Hill, Lupi Godinez. She doesn't have a bad loss. She really doesn't have a bad loss. And for Demopoulos, right? 10-5. her losses are, you know, Corey McKenna, Lupi Godinez, JJ Aldridge, Karolina Kowalkiewicz. They're not bad losses either. And she's coming off her last fight where she beat Kanako Maruta, where she's a plus 250 dog, and she goes out there and picks up the victory. Again, Demopoulos has shocked me before. I have picked Demopoulos some too, but Demopoulos has gone out there and won fights that I didn't think she was going to go out there and win. But I don't know how she beats Emily Ducote. Honestly, I don't know how she wins this fight. She's going to have to get the fight down on the ground because that's her only pathway to victory in this fight. Even though in the Kanako Maruta fight, Maruta takes her down 5 times and Demopoulos just kind of you know, I don't know. Maruta doesn't do anything on the ground, so they give the fight to Demopoulos. I don't know. I thought Maruta won. It was a really bad decision. It was really bad. It was one of the worst ones I've seen in a while. It's really bad. Maruta loses the first. The second's the swing. The third's definitely Maruta. I don't understand how you give the fight to Kanako Maruta. I get it. She didn't do any damage really on the ground, but Demopoulos didn't do any damage on the feet when the in the minute of the round that the fight was on the feet. It sold my parlay too, which again, that's why you don't bet on women's MMA. But I was like, it was bad. It was really bad. Maruta should have won the fight. I don't know why they gave it to Demopoulos. Demopoulos was even surprised that she won the fight. Because it was unanimous. It was 2-1. Everyone was like, all right, Maruta's got this one. No. Karolina Kowalkiewicz went out there and outstruck Demopoulos. Okay. Like, the thing is, Demopoulos just got out-grappled by Maruta. Okay. Ducote's going to go out there and try to strike with her. So, it is going to be the grappling game at Demopoulos that is going to try to win her this fight. I don't know how successful she's going to be with that. Because I think Ducote's good enough with her defensive wrestling. She's only been taken down once in the UFC, and it was against Lupi Godinez. 92% takedown defense rate in the UFC. Godinez went 1 for 3. Yoder went 0 for 3, excuse me. Angela Hill didn't shoot a takedown. Jessica Penne shot 8, went 0 for 8. Emily Ducote's really good at stuffing takedowns. And on the feet, she'll kick the hell out of your legs. She'll go out there and outbox you. And she's going to give Demopoulos a lot of trouble. I think Ducote's kind of on par right now, kind of where Karolina Kowalkiewicz is in this point in both their careers. And Karolina Kowalkiewicz easily beat Demopoulos. So Emily Ducote is going to easily beat Vanessa Demopoulos. It's an easy pick for me. It really is. Demopoulos is 5 years older too. She's just not as quick as Ducote. She doesn't hit as hard as Ducote. I just don't see it. I don't know why people are backing Demopoulos here. I don't like, if there's something I'm missing, I don't know. But like, I look at the odds and I'm like, yeah, that's where this fight should be. So give me Emily Ducote every day of the week. It's one of the easier picks for me to make on this card. But the easiest pick on this card is this fight right here. Adrian Yanez versus Vinicius Salvador. Guys, what are we doing? This fight should not be sanctioned. It should not be sanctioned at all. This is ridiculous matchmaking, but we'll take the free pick here. Adrian Yanez by first round knockout. I get it. Yanez lost back-to-back, so they're doing this to get Yanez another win. And they're doing it, it's on an Apex card because it's not going to get much attention, and people are going to see when Yanez fights again on a fight night in front of a crowd. You're going to be like, oh, okay, Yanez is coming off a victory. You know, he's coming off a knockout when it's going to look good on tape where, 1-2 this guy's to oblivion. It's going to look good when he check right hooks him to victory. It's going to look great, right? It's going to be great. But the matchmaking is horrible for this fight. It's really bad. You go from fighting Rob Font and Jonathan Martinez to Vinicius Salvador. If you don't know who Vinicius Salvador is, this guy's 0-2 in the UFC. He is a flyweight going up to 135 pounds. So he has not seen the power that, I know that the power discrepancy isn't massive between 125 pounders and 135 pounders, but he's going to see a huge power discrepancy because Yanez is one of the hardest hitting bantamweights that they have. So you go from fighting Victor Altamirano and CJ Vergara to Adrian Yanez. I don't understand it at all, but they want Yanez to win, which is great. Get Yanez the first round knockout victory. Salvador has lost back-to-back decisions. Vergara and Altamirano. It's just I don't like it. I don't like it. Salvador looked good on the Contender where he beat Shannon Ross, but Shannon Ross showed in the UFC he wasn't very good. He knocked him down 3 times. Okay. Well, Shannon Ross was horrible in the UFC. And Salvador's lost back-to-back fights. Has he lost them convincingly? He's stolen rounds, but he hasn't won the fight, obviously. He's lost 2-1 in both those. I believe he won a round against Altamirano. Yeah, he did. But, like, again, you're going up a weight class, you're 0-2, and you have to take on a guy like Yanez, who has been fighting tough opponents like Rob Font and Jonathan Martinez, who are in the top 15. Yanez, again, he beats these type of guys. This reminds me of, like, a Gustavo Lopez. Randy Costa, that was like 2 up-and-coming guys, but like this reminds me of the Tony Kelly fight. Tony Kelly shouldn't have been in there with Adrian Yanez. There was just heat behind that fight, thanks to Twitter. That's why they made the fight. Other than that, I mean, right, like Kelly got cut right after, and he jumped from Kelly to Rob Font, which I probably should have saw that and probably picked Rob Font. I picked Yanez in every single fight that he's had. I'll be honest with you. I picked him in every single fight that he's had since the Contender, since LFA. I've picked him in every single fight. If I'm being completely honest with you, but I'm picking him again here because this fight makes complete sense for him to win. Now, again, going forward, we'll see what they match him up against next. But this is just going to be an easy fight for Yanez. The boxing's very crisp. He's going to go out there and he's going to put some punches into Salvador. And it's going to be a very tough night in the office for Vinicius Salvador. They are doing this to get this guy out of the UFC because this is the easiest way to get him out of there because they know Yanez is going to beat him to a pulp. Give me Adrian Yanez to win the fight by first round knockout. Again, it is the easiest one to pick on the entire card. To our next one, going to the women's strawweight division, we've got Angela Hill taking on Luana Pinheiro. I'm picking Angela Hill. And again, as back-to-back fights where I just gave the pick right away, this is a fight that it feels like, you know, Angela Hill just wins. She beats some of these fringe, borderline top 15 fighters who, you know, are just kind of there. Like, I got the Denise Gomez fight right with Angela Hill. It's just like I said at the beginning of that fight prediction too, I was just like, it feels like a fight Angela Hill wins because she beats some of these fighters. She'll go out here, she'll beat Luana Pinheiro, and then next fight, she's going to get a fighter against, I don't know, let me get a random fighter in the top 15 that you know that Angela Hill will lose to, but then it'll just repeat. She'll go back and fight fighters outside the rankings or borderline fighters, and she'll keep beating them. Like, seriously. Her next fight, she's going to go out and fight Lupi. Oh, she already fought Lupi. She beat Lupi Godinez. That's weird. She's going to go fight Yasmin Lucindo. There we go. Oh, Lucindo's a fight that actually, like, that's like a stupid fight that Hill could win. Hill's going to go next fight. She'll fight, I guess, Hebas? Yeah, she'll fight Amanda Hebas, and she's going to lose. She'll get dusted in the Hebas fight. And then we'll cycle back, and then she's going to fight a fighter who's outside the top 15. That's what happens with Angela Hill, right? When you look at this fight on paper, yeah, Pinheiro kind of has a chance, but Pinheiro in her last fight just got spinning wheel kicked by Amanda Hebas. And now she's going to go out here and get Hill. I just haven't been all that impressed with Luana Pinheiro. I thought she had a very close fight with Michelle Waterson Gomez that Michelle Waterson probably should have won. Her wins are Sam Hughes and Randa Marcos. And she got illegal upkicked by Randa Marcos. So she didn't even, like, really win that fight. I actually picked Marcos to beat her, and I was mad when she illegally upkicked her. Right? So those are her wins. It's a DQ win over Marcos, Sam Hughes, who was 5-3 going into that fight, and Michelle Waterson, who's like 39, and she didn't really beat her, kind of beat her. Close. It was in Miami. It was a very close fight. So that shows you what Luana Pinheiro has been in the UFC. And that's a ranked fighter in the strawweight division. She is, let me check, she's 9. After beating Waterson at this Michelle Waterson, who's still 14, but still, that goes to show you where this weight class is. And she lost to Hebas, which she should, that's what's supposed to happen. Angela Hill's going to win this fight. Yeah, Angela Hill's going to outbox her. This is an Angela Hill victory here. Angela Hill's had too many fights in the UFC. This is fight 26 for her in the UFC. This is a fight where Hill's going to keep her distance, and she's going to go out here and win this one. I don't think it's all that controversial of a pick. I don't think Pinheiro is very good. I really don't think she is. She has truly two wins in the UFC, one decent win in the UFC. That's the win over Gomez, Washington Gomez, that she barely won. And then it's Sam Hughes. But that's a ranked UFC strawweight. It blows my mind. It really does. Angela Hill is going to be in the top 10. I can't believe it. She's going to win. I don't know why people are taking Pinheiro. What jumps off the page for Pinheiro? Nothing. If I'm being honest, what jumps off the page for Angela Hill? Nothing. But Angela Hill has been in these type of fights before. I'm going to quote Anthony Smith to I'm going to kind of quote Anthony Smith here. Something in my eye, I don't know. But like, fights like this. He brought this up when Anthony Smith beat Vitor Petrino. This guy's had 9 fights. I've had 50. I'm going to win these type of fights. Okay, I picked Petrino. I said that week, though, Anthony Smith has a very good chance of winning. This is the type of fight. Angela Hill has had 25 fights in the UFC. Luana Pinheiro has had 4. She's going to win these type of fights. Angela Hill gets it done by unanimous decision. Let's move on to our co-main event here. We will now move to the welterweight division. Chaos Williams taking on Carlston Harris. This is such an Apex main event. It is such an Apex main event. Because Chaos Williams hasn't fought in a year. Carlston Harris is coming off a win over Jeremiah Wells. Carlson Harris is 36 years old. Williams is 30. Harris is an older welterweight. He's still doing his thing, though. And Chaos Williams hasn't really seen the hype that he once had, right? Like, you know, after the win over Abdulrazak Alhassan, I mean, the hype this guy had was insane. Like, he hits him with a punch that you don't even think that's gonna, like, flatline Abdulrazak Alhassan like it did. It just puts him out cold, and, like, he was out, DC said he's out for, like, 5 minutes. It was bad. But Williams, since then, really hasn't, you know, kept the momentum going, right? He loses to Michel Pineda. Well, Michel Pineda is on a heater right now. He beat Semmelsberger. He knocks out Miguel Baeza. He loses to Randy Brown by split decision at UFC 274. And he beats Rolando Bedoya in his last fight by split decision, barely. Now he's going to go out here and get Carlson Harris. I think stylistically it is tough for him because Carlson Harris is going to grapple and Carlson Harris is going to give him hell on the ground. Because that's what Harris does, right? The guy's one loss in the UFC is Shavkat Rakhmonov. I understand he's 36. He's an older welterweight that likely doesn't have a future in the top of at the top of the division. Because he's not a prospect, right? But his wins are good. You look at the wins, man. Christian Aguilera, okay, that's not a great one. But Impa Kasanganay is a good win. That's a win that's going to keep on aging well. Kasanganay is the champion in PFL. I think he's going to win back-to-back championships over there. You look at the match, he's getting Jacob Neto in his next fight, the PFL Europe champion. It's a fight that's made out for Kasanganay to win. He's getting a guy in Neto who just got knocked out 2 months ago, and they're going to fight again. And Kasanganay is the biggest power puncher in that division. And Kasanganay, truly, I think he's going to be able to skip the matchup between. He's not going to have to fight Carlos Jr. or Wilkinson in the championship. So he's going to get, like, I don't know who he might fight Silveira in the first round. I don't know, someone like that. And he'll be able to skip the two champions until the championship fight. And I think he will get the better of either Wilkinson or Carlos Jr. I think the Carlos Jr. fight is the fight that he wants. Honestly, I think Carlos Jr. is better than Wilkinson. Or sorry, for Kasanganay, I think Carlos Jr. is a better matchup for Kasanganay than Wilkinson is. Truly, I think Kasanganay's defensive wrestling is really good. Anyways, I mean, the way he's able to beat Polizzi. I can keep going on and on about Kasanganay. Kasanganay is one of my favorite fighters. But Harris, right, the winner of Kasanganay keeps aging well. Knocked Impa out in the first round, something that a lot of guys have not been able to do. Beats Jared Gooden. Okay, Gooden just dropped out of the fight with Jousset. Again, that fight's happening for me tomorrow in St. Louis. And then he beats Jeremiah Wells by Anaconda choke in the third round. So you know, again, he's got the power on the feet, and he's also got the grappling too to back it up. I understand Shavkat knocked him out, but again, no shame in losing to that guy. There's no shame in losing to Shavkat Rakhmonov. Rakhmonov is an absolute monster. He's a unit, right? Chaos Williams hits hard. I get that. Carlson Harris has been in a lot of fights. I think as long as Carlson Harris is able to stay out the big power shots that Williams throws, and Williams, again, you know, finished by Asa, but he's not the one-shot knockout guy that we thought he once was after the wins over Morono and Abdulrazak Alhassan. So he's not entirely what we thought he was at what we thought he was at one point. I don't think he's going to be able just to completely. I mean, again, he's got that one punch knockout power. But I don't think he's going to be able to land that on Carlson Harris in this fight. I think Harris, again, will be able to eat some punches here. He'll be able to stay in the fight. I think he will take Chaos Williams down. I think he will give Chaos Williams a lot of trouble on the ground as well. I don't think Chaos Williams has seen anyone with the grappling game of Carlson Harris, especially in the UFC just yet. Yeah, you look at Pineda, but Pineda's more, again, of a striker who does have jiu-jitsu to complement it. I don't think Chaos Williams has seen anyone of the level of grappling that Carlson Harris has. He wasn't fully able to see it against Morono, so that's why I'm kind of excusing that, because Morono, the fight only happened 27 seconds. I think Carlson Harris gives him a very tough problem on the ground, and Carlson Harris is going to submit Chaos Williams in the second round. So it can be Carlson Harris in the co-main event, the first UFC fighter, I believe the only UFC fighter still, from Guyana. It can be Carlson Harris to win the fight by second round sub. Let's go on to the main event. Here we go in the featherweight division, 5 rounds. Edson Jr. Barboza taking on the Miracle, Lerone Murphy. Are we going to get another fight like Sodiq Yusuff, Edson Barboza, where Barboza, the veteran, goes out there and wins and just, you know, fights off the up-and-comer? Here, the up-and-comer is Lerone Murphy from England. He is 32 years old, undefeated. The one draw Zubair Tukhugov back in Abu Dhabi in 2019 at UFC 242. Tough fight, split draw, no shame in that. right? Since then, a knockout victory over Ricardo Ramos in the first round, a unanimous decision victory in a fight that I thought he was actually going to lose against Douglas Silva de Andrade, a second round TKO win, or knockout win, a huge knockout win over Mr. Finland Makwane Mirakani, and then a win over Gabriel Santos by split decision, and then a win over Joshua Culibao by unanimous decision. My thing with Murphy is that he hasn't been the most impressive. Like, this isn't a guy that you're thinking, okay, like, no one wants to fight Murphy coming up the ranks. He's not. He's impressive, but I wouldn't say he's necessarily a killer. That's no disrespect to Lerone Murphy at all. But he's not a guy that's all that feared in the weight class, I don't think. I don't think Barboza is all that like, oh, like, you know, I have to fight this guy, damn. Like, no, I think this is a fight that Barboza definitely thinks he's going to go out there and win, obviously. But I was more concerned with Barboza going into the Sodiq Yusuff fight than this one. I picked Barboza to beat Yusuff. We picked him as a dog. He ended up winning. We cashed that. I think we're going to take Barboza again as an underdog. I think so. I think he's able to outpace Lerone Murphy in this fight. Barboza's been there in 5-round environments. I'm taking Edson Jr. or Barboza to win this fight by unanimous decision. Again, I have not seen Lerone Murphy in this 5-round environment. We know the striking game that Barboza has. He's able to go in there and really do damage against some of these guys. You saw the way he was, you know, he was down at that point, down at a point in that fight against Yusuff, and he came back, regrouped after he got dropped in the first round, losing the first 2, comes back, gets the knockdown in the third, and that's really the swaying point of that fight where he's able to win the last 3 rounds and win it 48-46 in the cards, right? I think that's a big part of this fight is the experience that Edson Barboza has been there. I am not concerned that Lerone Murphy is going to knock him out. He had a perfectly timed knockout win over Makwane Mirakani, who has no chin, but a perfectly timed knockout that looked very good. The knee was great. Mirakani's on his way in, boom, big knee, Murphy knocks him out. It's a great finish, one of the better finishes of that year, in my opinion. But I don't think he finishes Edson Barboza. I get it. Barboza's been in a lot of fights. He's been finished before. Chikadze knocked him out in a main event. Gaethje's knocked him out. Okay, that's fine. I don't think Murphy possesses that power to really finish him. And in this long environment, in this 25-minute environment of a fight, I do think Edson Barboza goes out there and wins. Again, he's turned away 2 up-and-comers in his last couple fights. Sodiq Yusuff, Billy Quarantillo. The knockout win over Quarantillo was great. Knocked him out with the knee. Back-to-back losses before that to Bryce Mitchell and Giga Chikadze. No shame in that, really. I don't think there is. The Shane Burgos fight still stands out to me. How he's able to go out there. It's the weird delayed knockout of Burgos. He gets finished, and then he just backs up against the fence, and he goes, and he just gets knocked out. It's really weird. But Barboza is able to overwhelm some of these guys. Lerone Murphy 100% hasn't seen the leg kicks of a guy like Edson Barboza either. I think it's a very tough fight for Murphy in his first main event because Barboza is, if we're being honest, he's that gatekeeper to the top 10. Let's see where Murphy, is Murphy ranked? I think he's got to be, right? Lerone Murphy is ranked, oh, he's not ranked. Wow, I'm surprised he's not. Like, I'm surprised he's not ranked over Yusuff, who's at 15. Barboza's 11, right? So yeah, this is the gatekeeper, essentially the top 15, right? Barboza, if he wins, will get a fight to work his way back up the rankings, I think, right? I think he's gonna get a fight like probably Kattar, honestly, right? He'll probably get Calvin Kattar, because Kattar's coming off that not that impressive fight against Aljamain Sterling, but again, Sterling's gonna do that to some of these guys. I think Sterling has a very good chance, honestly, to become the champion in this weight class very soon. Just watch out. He might not, you know, he didn't wow you with the Kattar fight. But Aljo's good, and Aljo's going to give some of these guys problems at the top of the weight class. I'm just saying. I think he gives Ilya a very tough fight. Anyways, I think Edson does fight off Lerone Murphy here, and I think he does win. I'm taking Edson Jr. Barboza to win this main event by decision. I think his striking game's all around better. We're seeing a straight kickboxing fight in this fight, in my opinion. I think Murphy will shoot some, but I do think Edson Barboza's defensive wrestling is good enough to keep the fight on the feet. Yusuff tried a little bit. He was able to keep it standing. I get it. Barboza was melted by Bryce Mitchell. Completely different fight. I'm not concerned about it at all. I think Barboza actually is able to keep the fight standing, and if it is standing, yeah, Edson Barboza is going to go straight through Lerone Murphy, and he's going to outstrike him for a unanimous decision victory. I think he wins 4 rounds to 1. I think it's just too tough of a step up right now for Lerone Murphy. I get it, he's undefeated, and he's going to have to make that jump eventually, but I still think a 38-year-old Edson Jr. Barboza wins in the main event. We're taking the Brazilian Edson Barboza to pick up his 25th professional MMA victory. Give me Edson Barboza to win by unanimous decision. And folks, thank y'all for watching our UFC Fight Night Barboza versus Murphy predictions here on the channel. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure to hit the subscribe button down below for more MMA and UFC here on the channel. Tomorrow, again, that Bellator Paris, France card with Magomedov and Patchy Mix, the rematch in the main event. We'll be back next week. Actually, there's no MMA next week, I don't think, at all. I don't think. We'll be back in 2 weeks for UFC 301, and I believe we have PFL starting back up soon, or is it Bellator? I think it's Bellator again, right? Maybe just UFC. Yeah, it's just UFC in 2 weeks. So no MMA next week, but in 2 weeks we'll be back for UFC 302, not 301, 302, Poirier Makhachev, and then again tomorrow, Bellator France predictions on the channel as well. So folks, thank you all for watching. Make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoy the video. Make sure to comment if you do disagree with any of the picks. Folks, thank you all for watching, and Mamba forever.